Seeing as how Bad Boys Ride and Die is doing well at the box office, I decided to go back and check out the movie that started the whole franchise, 1995's Bad Boys, starring Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, directed by Michael Bay. Now, is this the movie that makes people think Michael Bay is a competent director who can stage good action scenes and tell a story with nuanced characters and complex motivations? No, not really. We'll wait for The Rock for that one, but this movie is still very much enjoyable. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence play Mike Lowry and Marcus Burnett, two young hotshot narcotics detectives with the Miami PD. At the start of the movie, a group of thieves aided by an ex-dirty cop steal over $100 million worth of drugs from the police department's evidence vault. The police department's internal affairs division is investigating it as an inside job and is threatening to shut down the department if they don't solve the case soon. So Mike and Marcus are under the gun to try and get answers. During the course of his investigation, Will Smith's character Mike asks a female friend of his, Max, who's also an escort, if she can keep her ear to the ground and let him know if she hears anything about the missing drugs. Max gets offered a job as a party guest for a guy who could potentially have the information Mike needs, but the guy wants two girls, so Max brings her roommate Julie with her, who is played by Tia Leone. The guy throwing the party is the dirty cop who aided the thieves, and he also stole a brick of drugs during the operation. The group of thieves arrive at the party and are naturally upset that their guy would steal from them and risk exposing their operation, so they kill the ex-cop and Max. Julie witnesses this whole thing but is able to escape. She's distraught, but she still calls the Miami PD and only wants to deal with Mike since she knows corrupt cops are involved and that Max trusts him. Mike isn't available, so Marcus meets up with her pretending to be him. Julie is afraid for her own life and hesitant to cooperate with police, but she's willing to stay with Mike during this time. The rest of the movie has Mike and Marcus trying to go through the usual police procedures to track down the bad guys while keeping their witness alive and also not revealing to her that they're switching places with each other. The movie itself is a pretty standard buddy cop action comedy, not too many twists and turns that you really have to pay attention to. It's only elevated by the chemistry between Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, and I think that's the standout for this movie. You really get the feeling that they're longtime friends who've been doing this for quite some time, all the way down to the fact that during a shootout situation, they'll still be arguing and bickering with each other like an old married couple. And they have the classic comedic duo between the two of them. Will Smith's character is the wild card ladies man, smooth talker, who is a second generation rich kid, but only became a cop because he likes being in an action situation. Martin Lawrence's character is a family man with a wife and kids. He's a bit more neurotic and tries to avoid violence, but that's not to say he can't perform when violence starts popping off around him. And I can't emphasize this enough. This movie would not be what it is without Will Smith and Martin Lawrence in their roles, because there's 1,000 buddy cop movies out there. It's practically a genre at this point with few standout successes. This being amongst them simply because each one of these actors is able to bring something genuine to the role where they fit the trope, but at the same time, they also feel like real characters that you can believe in. And it is funny to hear the back and forth between the two of them. Otherwise, this would just be a regular run-of-the-mill buddy cop movie with some action scenes sprinkled throughout it. And speaking of action, this is Michael Bay's feature directorial debut, and love him or hate him, no one can deny that the guy has an eye when it comes to staging action scenes. And this one is particularly good because he's a little bit more restrained since he's early on in his career. He doesn't necessarily have the budgets that he does in other movies, and this is before CGI became what it is, so they really have to rely on a lot of the practical effects, and even though it gets really ridiculous and they find excuses to have exploding barrels of ether and other things like that in the movie, it's pretty laughable, but at the same time, it's quite fitting for this movie. And the action scenes that you see throughout the movie, whether it's just run-of-the-mill shootouts and chase sequences or a combination of the two, it's still a lot of fun to watch. The weakest part of this movie has to be the character of Julie, because she comes across as kind of an annoying wet blanket throughout most of the movie and doesn't really provide anything unique to the dynamic between Mike and Marcus. They still behave exactly the same whether she's around or whether she's not. The only difference is they just call each other by the opposite name in her presence. It's not like she's even that valuable to the plot either, because pretty early on she tells Mike and Marcus all the information of value she knows about the bad guys, and then she just kind of tags along with them throughout the rest of the movie, even though it doesn't make sense why she'd be tagging along with them. It really does feel like the film is just trying to come up with an excuse why they should include her, even though she really has no part to play. Like at the end of the third act, she's kidnapped by the bad guys and held as a hostage during their big secret drug deal. Never mind the fact that it made no sense why they would hold her as a hostage instead of just killing her, since that's what they're trying to do throughout the rest of the movie, but they decided to hold her as a hostage, and then she's just basically there when Mike and Marcus arrive to try to stop this drug deal. Now, if she would have escaped from captivity and got a hold of a phone and called Mike and Marcus and let them know the secret location of this drug deal, then maybe she would have contributed something to the plot. But instead, Mike and Marcus are able to find the location of this drug deal on their own. And the only thing she really does is just create more stakes, because not only do they have to stop this drug deal from going down, but they also have to keep her from getting killed too. I suppose one can argue she's involved with the plot because after she's kidnapped by the bad guys, they call Mike and Marcus to gloat and say like, hey, we're going to have this big drug deal go down in a couple hours and then we're going to kill her, ha ha ha. And then that kind of gets Mike and Marcus on the ball to try to find her location, which they ultimately do. But if that's the only reason why they kept her around in the story, then to me it seems kind of weak. And also, could we talk about the fact that Tia Leone just isn't a very good actress? It seems like throughout most of the movie, her face is just stuck with kind of a blank expression with her mouth slightly open. And if that's her idea of acting, then I can understand why she's not really in more movies. Still, outside of her performance, I think everyone else was serviceable for what they had to do. And at just under 2 hours, the movie's not terribly long, but it does feel like it drags a little bit at times. I didn't find myself bored during this, but it does seem like there are some scenes that could be cut out entirely and nothing would be missed. Like the opening scene when they're getting carjacked. Yeah, it does kind of establish both the characters, but it doesn't tell you anything at that scene that you don't pick up on other parts of the movie. The only difference is this is kind of a redundancy that doesn't add anything to the plot. Or there's that scene when they go into the convenience store and the teller at the cash register mistakes them for robbers, so he pulls a gun on them. It's a funny moment, but it does feel like it's a scene that should have been more of a deleted scene left on the cutting room floor as opposed to something that's in the final movie. Overall, I did really enjoy this movie. The story is nothing to write home about, but the dynamic between Martin Lawrence and Will Smith is definitely the star of the show. I love the back and forth between the two characters, and there was a lot of genuinely funny moments. And love him or hate him, Michael Bay does know how to stage and shoot an action scene, especially some of his earlier movies like this or The Rock, where he wasn't over relying on CGI because the technology just wasn't there, and he had some constraints from the budget, so he had to become more reliant on the practical effects and how to best utilize them. And if you want to go back to a time like action movies were more like this, like back in the 90s, where it was all about just the flashy gunplay and big explosions, then I recommend Bad Boys from 1995, and that's why I'm giving this movie a 7 out of 10. But let me know what you think about this movie in the comment section below. Do you like the original Bad Boys, or what's your favorite Bad Boys movie in the whole franchise? Because I'm curious what people have to say about it. Me personally, I like Bad Boys 2, but I still think Bad Boys 1 is a great movie. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to see more of my movie reviews or keep up to date with the latest entertainment news. And if you can, make sure you click that like button and share the video because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.